Deep inside an enchanted forest, hidden far beyond the reach of humans, lay a mysterious fairy kingdom called Elaria. The fairies lived among enormous trees, glowing mushrooms, sparkling streams, and flowers that illuminated the forest floor like tiny moons. Among them, one flower was more important than all the others, the magical Lunara bloom. The Lunara blooms were the kingdom's most important source of food. But one morning, the young fairy discovered something deeply disturbing. An entire patch of Lunara blooms had vanished. There were no footprints, no broken stems, and no disturbed roots. There was simply empty soil. The young fairy hurried to warn the others. Soon, fear spread throughout Elaria. If the flowers continued disappearing, the fairies could lose their food supply. The fairies searched the fields carefully. They examined the soil, followed the surrounding paths, and searched for clues. But nothing revealed what had taken the flowers. With no evidence to follow, the fairies began watching the forest animals. Perhaps one of them was responsible. Yet the next morning, even more flowers were gone. The animals were innocent, and somehow the mysterious thief remained completely unseen. But the animals came and went without touching the flowers. The elders could no longer wait. They decided to search the deeper forest for whatever was causing the disappearances. And among them walked a creature the fairies believed was their legendary guardian. It looked powerful, familiar, and almost exactly like the creature described in their ancient stories. But something was wrong. The creature suddenly stumbled. Its strength disappeared, and its enormous body collapsed onto the forest floor. The young fairy rushed to its side. The creature was breathing weakly and could barely move. It looked desperately hungry. Nearby there were berries and nuts, but the creature had not touched them. The young fairy began to wonder what kind of food this may be. There were berries and nuts, but the creature had not touched them. The young fairy began to wonder what kind of food this mysterious creature truly needed. That night, the young fairy followed the creature in secret. Hidden among the glowing mushrooms, he watched as it slowly approached the Lunara fields. Then the mystery was finally revealed. The creature lowered its head and began eating the precious Lunara blooms. The flowers were not being stolen. The discovery was heartbreaking. The creature they believed would protect Elaria was consuming the very food the fairies needed to survive. But the young fairy noticed something strange. The creature wasn't attacking. It was simply starving. They are being eaten for survival. A new possibility began to emerge. Perhaps this creature was not the legendary guardian at all. Perhaps the fairies had mistaken one creature for another. To discover the truth, the young fairy flew to the oldest library in Elaria. Hidden inside an ancient tree were centuries of forgotten knowledge. He searched through dusty scrolls and enormous books, looking for every record of the legendary guardian. Page after page revealed stories from the distant past. Finally, he discovered an ancient book bearing the silver emblem of the guardian. Inside could be the answer to the mystery. The ancient illustration looked remarkably similar to the creature he had found. But the differences were there. Different ears. The young fairy returned to the resting creature with the ancient book. This time, he looked beyond their similarities and searched carefully for the differences. The resemblance was astonishing. The body shape, the powerful limbs, the broad head, and even the markings seemed almost identical. But the more closely he looked, the more differences he discovered. The first clue was in the teeth. The second clue was the tail. The ancient guardian had a short tail. This creature had a long, flexible tail adapted to a very different way of life. Suddenly the pieces came together. This was not the guardian. It was a different species. Yet somehow, the two creatures had evolved remarkably similar appearances. The young fairy shared the discovery with the elders. Two different species could look surprisingly alike. But how could nature produce such a coincidence? Then the elder described. Over many generations, unrelated species can independently develop similar features, similar bodies, similar abilities, similar ways of surviving. This phenomenon is called convergent evolution. Different beginnings can lead to similar solutions. Imagine two different animals beginning with different bodies and different ancestors. If they face similar environments and similar challenges, nature may favor similar solutions. And finally, the fairies understood the truth. The creature had never been their guardian, and it had never meant to harm them. It was simply another species, shaped by its own struggle to survive. So the fairies peacefully stepped aside and allowed the creature to return to its natural home in the forest. They had learned an important lesson. Nature can take different paths and still arrive at remarkably similar results. That is